30 years ago, we reported on the FDA's new ruling on salt labeling. But 30 years later, are we still just as confused about the issue of salt? This week, we celebrated the first edition of the Lempert Report by highlighting stories that we wrote about when we first launched 30 years ago. One of those stories, it was all about salt. The FDA's ruling requiring sodium content disclosure on all nutrition labeling was going into effect that year. And as a result, we predicted that we'd see a steady growth in reduced sodium products. Of interest was in the area of frozen dinners, which generally packed a serious salt punch with up to 2,000 milligrams of sodium per meal. But also of interest to us was the continuing consumer confusion when it came to sodium descriptors and those FDA guidelines. According to the FDA, sodium-free would count as less than 5 milligrams per serving. Very low sodium would be 35 milligrams or less per serving. Low sodium, 140 milligrams or less, and reduced sodium equaled a 75% reduction in sodium content. Well, 30 years later, the FDA has added a few more descriptions, which may be making things even more confusing for the average shopper. We now also have light in sodium, which indicates that a product contains at least 50% less sodium than its standard version. Unsalted or no salt added indicates that no sodium is added to the product during processing, but the product still contains the sodium that naturally occurs in the product's ingredients. And then, if a product is labeled as healthy, it must contain no more than 480 milligrams of sodium for an individual food item, like a snack food, or no more than 600 milligrams for a meal or main dish, like a frozen dinner. Well, today there's still generally a lot of confusion over salt. What's too much? Is eating too little bad for you? Well, the American Heart Association says that 90% of Americans consume too much salt, and 1 in 3 have high blood pressure. The recommended daily sodium intake, according to the FDA, is 2,300 milligrams, but then the American Heart Association recommends 1,500 milligrams. Well, perhaps in another 30 years, we'll finally understand the sodium guidelines and dilemma. Be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode, and visit supermarketguru.com for more information and more videos just like this.